All right, I guess I will go ahead and get started. I know we have a few other people who will be joining us in just a second, but they won't miss too much here at the beginning. Again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Adam Betuel, again, Conservation Director with Atlanta Audubon. And today we're going to talk about some bird watching we did in Guatemala a couple of years back. We are trying to provide as much digital and virtual content that we can for you all as we all try to figure out what this new normal is going to be like and how things are going to play out this summer and beyond. So I encourage you and hope you'll continue to check in with us for our virtual bird walks on Fridays. And again, we're going to have more of these travel logs coming up in the next month or two. We're going to have chances to meet our ambassador hummingbirds, bird walks, e-bird workshops, a little bit of everything to try to keep you engaged and keep you thinking about birds and how you can help birds during this quarantine. So again, we're going to talk about Guatemala bird watching. And to get things started, I will go back to 2017. So in 2017, we at Atlanta Audubon decided to kind of reinvigorate or bring back our international travel program. So before that, we had different volunteers and other Audubon members who had led maybe local trips or excursions to the Georgia coast, Merritt Island. But in 2017, I was able to convince our then executive director, Nikki Belmonte, that I should take a trip to Paraguay. Paraguay was a place that I had spent a summer in college doing avian research. And lo and behold, her and the board actually said yes. And we went to Paraguay. We had a great time, saw lots of great birds. Everyone came back in one piece. And we kind of started a new program here at Atlanta Audubon to check out some other countries, primarily those that had a conservation connection to Georgia. I see that I'm getting a warning of my internet connection being a little unstable. So if I get wonky, bear with me and Dottie just let me know and I will backtrack or find a better spot to present from. So again, our international travel started in 2017. And when we came back, we were thinking, where do we want to go next? And I was lucky enough to pick that and decided to go with Guatemala. And Guatemala was, I thought, an interesting choice for many reasons. One, it was a location identified by National Audubon as one of their countries of importance. And so through the National Audubon International Alliances program, they looked at and selected a subset of countries in the Western Hemisphere that not only provided crucial habitat and connections for our migratory birds, but also were ripe for ecotourism, to engage local guides and to really focus on the training and teaching and connection of North American, primarily US tourists and bird watchers with local guides and local conservation efforts throughout Latin America. And so through this program, again, they're hoping to build stronger partnerships, bird-based tourism. How can we get some of the expertise that might be confined to the United States out to the rest of our hemisphere, and then again, engage those communities, bring science and learn from what the local expertise might be. On top of that, it made a lot of sense, Guatemala did, because it coincided with some of our Atlanta Audubon initiatives that we have here in town. One of that is shade-grown coffee. So in the upper right photo there, you will see a shade-grown coffee farm. So if you're unfamiliar, coffee is supposed to grow in the shade. It's a kind of a mid-story plant that thrives when there's a nice, tree canopy up above it and some, lower vegetation or ground cover. But in the past couple of decades, people have realized that if you cut down that beautiful forest and grow the coffee in the sun, like a monoculture, like you would soy or corn, it yields faster. But of course, there are massive environmental ramifications. There's a need for more pesticides and fertilizers, and the plant stops yielding sooner than it would if it was grown in the shade, as it should be. And it's not providing the bird habitat that we need. So you can see our Atlanta Audubon Society coffee logo featuring the wood thrush. This was some artwork done by David Hale, who's an Athens-based artist. And so it made sense to go to Guatemala because it fit in with these National Audubon programs. We could talk about coffee, and we could look for our focal bird of that time period, which was the wood thrush. We were doing a lot of education and conservation related programs, talking about, choosing the right coffee. You go to the store, and also talking about our birds and where they overwinter and the native plants that fuel them on these great journeys. So we were really hoping to see wood thrush when we were down in Guatemala. Guatemala also offered an amazing diversity for such a small place. So not only do they have a great diversity of habitat types, like the pine oak forest, which is in the bottom left there, more lowland tropical forest, kind of what you think of a hot, steamy Central American jungle in the top right. Amazing volcanic peaks and lakes, like Lake Atitlán, which you're seeing in the bottom right. And it has a great diversity of not necessarily cultures, which it does, but also just of history. So they have, Mayan ruins, Spanish colonial architecture and cities, and then a more modern city like you see in Guatemala City in the bottom left there. So it was just a unique place that kind of hit on all these things we were hoping to provide in an interesting and well-rounded trip. And of course, how could I forget the birds? So the habitats are great, the coffee connection is fantastic, but we want to see lots and lots of birds. So Guatemala, which is roughly the size of Tennessee, about 1/90th of the area of our country, has 760 birds. So it almost has, maybe off the top of my head, 80-some%, 90-some% of the birds of the United States all jammed into Guatemala. So it's an exciting place, it's small, it's compact, and there's all these habitats, there's all this amazing culture, and it's close to home. And so that was kind of the justification for why we wanted to give Guatemala a chance and see all the avifauna and culture that it has to provide. And so that's me on the left from a couple of years ago. I was lucky enough to represent Atlanta Audubon and be our contact and organizer as we went down. When we do these trips, we like to use local guides and local companies. For this, we use Cayaya Birding, and it's a husband and wife team or a partnership that runs it. And Claudia was our guide, which was a blessing that we were able to spend, a week or so with her. She was fantastic. She was so detail-oriented and had everything ready for us. And it made my life really incredibly easy. I think everyone was very happy, and she just ended up being such a treasure to travel with and to bird with. And to give you a little more information on Cayaya, in case you want to think about visiting Guatemala in the future, or just want to do some research, they do everything from bird ecotourism and leading these trips. They do legitimate hardcore research. They've done stuff with the unspotted saw-whet owl, which is that owl photo there in the top left. They produce all sorts of peer-reviewed literature. They've written on the birds of Guatemala, the distribution. They're really providing a lot of information for a country where some of that basic, ornithological expertise may be lacking. That's Claudia there in the bottom, and that's her partner Canute up in the top left. So they run Cayaya Birding. And we were also lucky enough to bird with a couple of these guides. In the bottom there, crouching down, that's Alfredo. He was a fantastic local guide that I got to spend a day with, which I will recap later on. He helped me and one of our trip goers get through some difficult stuff, but it was all worth it. So that photo is from the Christmas bird count that they run in the mountain pines of Guatemala. They run a few down there. All were established by Cayaya, and now have been kind of handed off to other birding groups. So great people to bird with and a really well-run organization. So here's kind of our itinerary. You can see Guatemala City is the bottom right dot. We did kind of a loop, more or less. There was some backtracking. And that area down near Tecpan and Los Terrales and Santiago Atitlán, very mountainous, again, volcanic. Then we went back to the capital and we flew up to Flores and went to Tikal, which is one of the major Mayan sites in Latin America. And again, up there in the north, very hot, very humid, jungly, quite different than what we're seeing in the south and west to that. And so that was our rough trip there. And it turned out to be very well-rounded and exciting. So here's our crew. I always joke, I say this every time, so if you've heard me talk before, I'm sorry you have to hear it again, but I always take a photo on the first day when everyone's all smiles and they have clean clothes and they're ready to go look for birds. So this is our crew outside of our hotel in Guatemala City right before we embarked on the first morning of our trip. You will also see that I have this big, nice, fancy camera that I borrowed from a friend and I did not know how to use properly. So some of these photos are mine, but I kind of fell short in the photography game. So I did steal some from other friends and from Google to help me complete this slideshow. We didn't really do much birding or any birding in Guatemala City, but I took some time by myself in the afternoon to kind of walk around It was honestly the part of the trip I was least looking forward to. I'd heard kind of mixed things about the city. But for my afternoon walking around and my last morning there, it was, at least where we were, was beautiful. You know, nice architecture, very safe to walk around. A couple cool hummingbirds hanging around. In this middle photo, you can see the entrance to our hotel. And I thought it was very neat because in this hanging vegetation, we had Tennessee warblers, which if you're a Georgia birder, those aren't the easiest birds to find. You can get them in fall during migration, but they're easy to overlook and they're often difficult in springtime. And they were just the common, you know, urban bird, almost like a house sparrow or a house finch here in Atlanta. So that was an exciting way to get things started. That's a photo of our checklist that Cayaya had put together for us in the bottom left. And we went out to eat at a really interesting local Mayan restaurant called Tikal. And in the bottom right, that's the kind of the roof or the ceiling within the restaurant. So it was a great way to get things started. So Guatemala City, we pretty much just arrived and departed from there. We got out when we could and we went up to Tecpan. And so Tecpan in Rincon, Suiza, which is kind of like a Swiss-themed restaurant, is at this high elevation site, you know, almost 8,000 feet. And it's this pine oak forest, very green, very lush, lots of epiphytes and bromeliads. And this area, this mountain pine pine oak mountain forest in this region has a lot of endemic birds, very special birds. That habitat is not that common, so things that are there are quite exciting. And someone on the trip even commented that, hey, it kind of looks like the North Georgia forest. Again, kind of that really lush green, you know, understory that was really full. It was a great spot to get started. And this location was right off the Pan American Highway, which we ended up using quite a bit as we traversed kind of northwest and back southeast. So here's the group. This is literally maybe 10 minutes after our pulling up to our first spot. Here, I think we're looking at acorn woodpecker and some swallows and band-tailed pigeon, all sorts of cool stuff. But this is right when we got things kicked off, not knowing what was going to come next. So one of the birds we found, band-backed wren. This was maybe the first true bird of the trip that we all got good eyes on. They had some young with them, very vocal. And you can't see their back there, you can just kind of see the spotted breast. But band-backed wren was a cool bird that we saw there. Slate-throated redstart, somewhat common bird throughout Central America, but they come in different color variations. This was a photo I took of one of our birds here at Tecpan. Black-capped swallow. This was one of the main target birds of this area, very specialized in this part of Guatemala. And we had, you know, a couple dozen pretty quickly soaring over the parking lot and along the trails. A nice forked tail for those. Almost like our tree swallow, just darker and again with that special tail. And, you know, we had some birds that are kind of more enigmatic or more representative of the Western United States. Again, I mentioned acorn woodpecker. Townsend's warbler is a bird that if you've birded out west, you've probably seen. But 70% of the Townsend's warbler population spends the winter in Guatemala. So it's a great spot to see them. Of course, you should check out the Western US and look for them. It was a new bird for me, honestly. I have not seen one yet in the United States, but I have now in Guatemala. But a large portion of their population, you know, depends on the Guatemalan, you know, high montane forest. However, if you're coming to Tecpan, you know, we had all those good birds. We had mountain trogon and, you know, belted flycatcher, all these really exciting birds, tufted flycatcher, excuse me. The real reason you want to go there is for pink-headed warbler. And if you look in the right there, that's the best photo I could get, which wasn't much and doesn't do the species justice. So that's what we were looking for, and we were fortunate enough to get a couple great looks at this bird. It's one of the true specialty species you hope to find when you head to Guatemala, and it was very cooperative for us. And again, not my photo, but an absolutely stunning species that we were lucky enough to get on our first full day of birding. So as a guide, it's a huge relief when you can show your group something as stunning as that right out of the gate. So after we birded there for a little while, we had some amazing lunch. We continued on to the area around Lake Atitlán. Again, this area is very volcanic. You can see those peaks in the background. The Sierra Madre de Chiapas is the mountain range there. And you know, it's a special place with high diversity, and it's a very active area with its volcanic behaviors. So that was something that we encountered during our stay. So our first few nights after leaving Guatemala City was at Los Turales. So Los Torales is a private reserve. It's kind of a mixture of nature trails. They produce ornamental plants that they sell to various markets, including the United States. They have the lodge, you know, various cabins, but that area is also prime for coffee. And so there are small farms nearby and they have their own coffee, and people harvest and then bring it to Los Torales and they process the beans. So that's one of the main reasons we came here, was not only the bird life, which totals over 350 different species, but because of this coffee, the shade-grown coffee. This larger area, the slope of the volcano here, is part of the Atitlán important bird area, and it's one of the largest forest patches left on the Pacific slope of the mountains here, or mountains there in Guatemala. And so here's a few photos I took, just kind of showing what the lodge or different cabins look like on the left. To the right is one of the entranceways to the dining hall. The food was fantastic. It was a really great place to stay. I can't recommend it highly enough. The family that runs it is fantastic, and the birding proved to be pretty awesome. So if you're lucky enough to have birded in Latin America, you know the importance and the enjoyment of the fruit feeders that many places put out. And so there are, you know, multiple feeders they would place with bananas or plantains, other citrus fruit, kind of anything that would attract the birds. So Rufousnaped Wren was one of the common species that we saw. That's what's photographed here. We had them pretty much every day in that area. Here's a great-tailed grackle. So if you're tuning in from Georgia, which I assume most of you are, we have our common grackles, which are here around Atlanta. We have our boat-tailed grackles, which are more common down on the coast. And then great-tailed grackles do extend into the US further west, you know, Texas, for example. But then they're a really common bird as you get down throughout Central America, excuse me. Cinnamon hummingbird, looking as tough as possible in that barbed wire. This was the most common hummingbird we had in this area. We had a lot of ruby-throated hummingbirds here. I didn't get any photos of those, or at least they're not included in the slideshow, but it was cool to see our wintering hummingbird there. Baltimore oriole was another really common bird that we had around the feeders here. Blue-gray tanager. I kind of equate them to our northern cardinal. When you're down in this part of Latin America, they're super, super common, kind of like the cardinals are here, but they're stunning. You know, if you have a friend who visits Georgia from out west, they see a cardinal, that might be their top bird of the trip because they're quite gorgeous. We maybe just get a little tired of them because we see them so frequently. But this blue-gray tanager was just amazing. We have Lesson's Motmot. You'll see the Motmots have that characteristic, typically that little racket tail at the bottom where the feathers are kind of turned and they'll kind of go back and forth like a cuckoo clock. They're in the same general grouping of birds as like kingfishers. So they're an interesting type of bird that's confined to Latin America. We had different saltators at these feeders, clay-colored thrush, which is kind of like the robin of northern Central America. 4 different types of orioles. I already mentioned Baltimore that was there, Altamira and spot-backed, all sorts of cool orioles. And it wasn't all birds. We had a basilisk lizard, or you may have seen it called a Jesus Christ lizard. They're the ones that can run so fast they run on top of water. So they were coming in to snack on the bananas as well. And nearby wasn't just the feeders. There were great trails that we took over a few days there. We had some open areas where we could scan. Right around here we had a bat falcon, which is a small kestrel-like little bird that, you know, unsurprisingly likes to eat bats. We also have golden-fronted woodpecker. This is the Velasquez variety of golden-fronted woodpecker, similar to our red-bellied. It's in the same genus, Melanurpes, but these were very common throughout our stay in Guatemala. That might look very familiar. That's a northern rough-winged swallow. So we were down in Guatemala in November and into December. So who knows, this could be your bird from around the corner here in Atlanta that's spending the winter down in Guatemala. So, you know, we all love seeing life birds and these colorful tropical gems, but it is a little special to see our wintering species, or what we call our wintering species, down in Latin America. Peruginous pygmy owl. Small but fierce. This was taken with my cell phone through a spotting scope, and so it sat there for quite a while, giving us some good looks. Collared aracari, or aracari, they're a member of the toucan family, as you can tell from that good-sized beak. We have a few of these, and there are multiple aracari species as you go throughout Latin America, but this is the most common to the north. yellow-naped parrot or yellow-naped Amazon. This is actually an endangered species, mainly found up and down the Pacific coast from southern Mexico down into Costa Rica. And I didn't get a good photo of these birds. They were mainly flying overhead. They would come in to roost and then leave again in the morning. That's when we would see them most frequently. But a loud, harsh, kind of squawking noise that they would put out. Really exciting find for all of us. So this is where the trip got real. So we went to Turales. We had all these great birds. But Los Turales is known for two birds. And in my mind, it's really known for one bird. And when I put this trip together, I was really hoping we'd get a chance to see one of them. But it came with, I needed someone to be brave enough to go with me. So within the itinerary, you had two options. You could either go look for this amazingly beautiful and rare tanager called the azure rump tanager. It's either vulnerable or endangered. It's very range restricted. It's hard to find. And it's a striking bird. And that's what we were going to do unless someone opted for option 2. And literally the last person to sign up said, I'm in for option 2. So most of the group went to go look for this tanager, and they found it. Again, a very exciting bird, and I'm somewhat devastated that I missed it. But I was keen to go for option 2. Now, here's the logo for Los Turales, and it happens to be our option 2 bird, which is a Horned Guan. And so guans are these large turkey-like birds. Very kind of old in their lineage, but the Horned Guan itself is kind of special. It's endangered. It's the only member of its genus. It's near endemic to Guatemala. It barely extends its range into southern Mexico. There's a site down in Chiapas, Mexico called El Triunfo, which I've not been to, but it's a great spot to look for this bird. And it's the only survivor of this ancient lineage of crassids, of these turkey-like birds. And it's been evolving independently for more than 20 million years. So it's this ancient, unique, weird, hard to find, turkey-like, googly-eyed bird. And except for 1 or 2 sites in northern Guatemala, it's difficult to get to the habitat. The few spots where it's easy to get to the habitat, it's not the safest or most desirable places to travel. So where you would normally go to see them, it takes some effort. And that's why I needed someone to sign up with me, because I wasn't going to go there by myself and I wasn't going to force the whole group to go. But me and Claire, we went for it. And so what did this all involve? Well, we had a 1:15 wake-up call for 1:30 coffee. So we were up, you know, I don't even know if I got any sleep, maybe a little bit. We were up super early to get some coffee. Then we left around 1:30, 1:40. And we had an hour-long drive in the pitch black. You can hear Claire dusting off her Spanish there. And it was just dense, dirt, bumpy road for an hour as we ascended up the low parts of this volcano. So from about 1:30 to 2:30 or so, we were there. And then we reached our first destination, which was this pitch black trail. And we had Alfredo there on the far left. You can see his backpack. He was the one I showed you earlier in the photo. And then we had a local guide who used to be a coffee farmer who lived up in these remote, it's a stretch to call it a town, this grouping of houses. And he had learned so much about the Horned Guan and was so good at tracking them that he has become more or less a full-time bird guide for people looking for them. A lot of these people are having difficult times right now with the lack of travel and tourism. But these were our experts. They were going to show us the Horned Guan. And so at around 2:45, 3 o'clock, we set off on this trail under a pitch black sky. The first few places we went were through coffee farms. So you can see the red cherry or the coffee bean on the tree to the left. On the right, you might be able to see the white kind of reflection of a common paraki, which is similar to like a whippoorwill or a chuckwill's widow. It's a night bird that's pretty common throughout, you know, it dips barely into the US, but then down throughout Latin America. It's one of the more common nocturnal birds. And one of many that we had on this walk, we had paraki, we had Mexican whippoorwill, fulvous owl, black and white owl. We had a mammal that I'm forgetting the name of right now, Gato Mixle. We could hear that in the background. So some really interesting stuff as we started hiking. And this hike was nothing but uphill the entire time. And this is often what I was looking at. I had my boots on, a headlamp, carrying my binoculars and a backpack with water and breakfast and lunch, and we kept pushing on. Right at first light, you could see the neighboring Fuego volcano, which was actively erupting. Nothing serious, no lava pouring everywhere, but it was spitting up quite a bit. And for a while there, maybe every half an hour, you could kind of feel a tremble and hear it, almost like loud thunder, as it, you know, kind of belched up some hot air there. So that was an added, I thought it was a pretty exciting component of the hike. And again, this is what the trail looked like once daybreak came. Not much of a trail, lots of loose leaf litter. But it was an amazing forest filled with bird sound. You can see these gigantic trees on the right, again, with all the bromeliads and dangling vegetation. So lush and so exciting, but again, all uphill. We would walk for a little bit, stop, walk, stop. Hours and hours of hiking up this hill. We finally get to a spot where we're allowed to rest. It's the very lowest point of where the Horned Guan can be found. And that's when I realized that my boots had broken. So both my heels were crumbling and kind of flapping as I walked, which this was not an ideal situation, but lucky enough it didn't tear at my feet too much. So we're up, you know, a couple thousand feet now. We're in the right area for the Guans, and they're not there. So we have a little bit of breakfast, and we have to hike up more. And it's getting denser and denser because the trail's not as well laid out. But luckily, our guides, doing their amazing work, get up ahead of us. And they go, oh, there's a Horned Guan. And I'm like, yes. And as I'm kind of power walking, oh, no, it flew away. There goes the Guan. So if you've been birding before, you've probably had that gut, you know, punch to your gut feeling when your life bird flies away from you, especially one that you just hiked for hours and hours and hours to look for. However, there were 3 of them. So the other 2 stuck around, and this was probably my best shot of one of the most memorable birds in my life, the Horned Guan. Again, this ancient bird with that crazy looking eye and that fleshy, you know, little horny nub right on top. And we were able to sit there for quite a while and really soak these birds in. You can see in the upper left some of the fruit. I can't remember the name of the tree off the top of my head, but they love that particular berry and are often found in that tree where it's fruiting. So, you know, we had great scope views. We really got to spend some time with the 2 birds that stuck around. They're just a little bit smaller than our wild turkey. And this bird's probably, I don't know, maybe 40 feet up in a tree. So just, again, such a unique experience and unique bird to spend time with. And here's a little cell phone video I was able to get to my scope, or one of the other scopes, as we are finishing our time with these amazing birds. So it might not be for you to put in that much work for that little bird, but it is definitely a memorable species to see if you ever happen to get one in Mexico, or Guatemala, excuse me. So you would think the way up, that was all the hard work, again, hours of uphill climbing, but the way down wasn't much easier. There was a lot of sliding on our butts and trying not to trip and fall. We did have daylight, so we could sneak in a little bit more birding. It was just stunning, again, with all the heliconias and other amazing flowers and vegetation. Some of it was gigantic. I'm not a small guy, so that was an amazing plant to see up close. And I mentioned the Fuego volcano was kind of burping and spitting up as we were going. You didn't even really realize until near the end of the hike that very light levels of ash had been falling on us. This was a juice can that was stuck in the side of my backpack that you can see the accumulating volcanic ash that was spraying on us as we were walking down the volcano. And so that was, again, our epic journey looking for the Horned Guan, while everyone else, maybe smartly, was looking at that tanager and enjoying time around the lodge. So we went to Turales not just to see the cool birds, but to take in the coffee, learn more about it, and see how that can affect our breeding birds up in the United States. So we were able to get a nice personalized coffee tour with the family at Los Turales. That's Alfredo in the background. This is our coffee guide, talking about the entire process and the importance and kind of what they do and how they do things at Los Turales when it comes to coffee production. So we went through the whole process of the initial sorting of different quality beans, and this is when they still have the cherry or the fruit around the outside, kind of how they sort them, how they're looking for good ones, some that are more ripe than others. some that are still pretty green. Then they have some interesting machines to help with husking and washing of the beans. On the right there, they have different bodies of, or different pools or water where certain beans will float, certain beans will sink, the husks should float, and it gives them not only an easy way to sort the beans and get kind of the slimy liquid off of the bean itself once the fruit's removed, but allows them to kind of inspect everything. So that was a really cool process. Here's some more washing. So after the beans are hushed, here's how the process down to the drying wax. And you can see that green coffee bean on the far right there. That's kind of what it looks like after it's been taken from the fruit and washed. You can see in the bottom middle image there, kind of that, you know, reddish, brownish color below. That's, again, some of the fruit or dried up red berry that's been disposed of. You know, one of the reasons that birds are so important for coffee is because they help with the coffee borer beetle. They'll eat the insects that are so prone to feast on these beans. This is one where there's obviously some impurities from the beetle, or the beetle getting in there and eating a little bit on the bean. So that was interesting to see, and again, really get the connection of why, you know, black-footed blue warblers and orioles and all these other insects are there, or birds are there to help eat these insects, and the relationship between our coffee and the birds. This is where they do most of the drying, or some of the drying at least. They kind of have it laying out and about. You'll see some of the coffee piles are more of that, you know, off-white tan color. Those are more bean. You can see the ones that have some of the reddy brown. Again, that's more the fruit. And they do something kind of interesting in those terrales where they'll take all sorts of different types of beans. They only harvest a couple days a year. And so some of the coffee's great and some of it's not so great. Some of it, the fruit is still stuck there, some of it's not. And that kind of leads to the different quality. So this particular farm, some of their beans do go to a massive coffee company throughout the world that's green and white and has a mermaid as their logo. And so that might be more the pure white, or this stuff with all the red on the bottom, that might be ground up to become instant coffee or instant espresso. So there was a wide range in the different quality and the way it was sold. Pretty much they were saying that anyone would buy the different varying beans depending on quality, and of course the price would change with that. This is some of the other drying techniques that they use if they have too much coffee to put out on the drying wax. And that was a very old machine that I think they had built custom to their site. And so if they didn't have enough room on the drying floor, they would tumble dry some of their beans there to help expedite the process. And again, here's some of the coffee on the right. Again, that has a lot of that extra fruit material. So that's probably not the highest end of coffees. But then it's all bagged up, and depending on what it looks like and the quality, it's shipped off to different roasters. So for example, the Atlanta Audubon coffee is roasted by Cafe Campesino down in Americas. So they get those bags of green coffee, they then roast it, and then that's when they sell it to you, or you drink a cup of coffee like we did here, which honestly I think is maybe the best latte I've ever had in my life. We were within hundreds of feet of the entire process, from where it's grown to where it's cleaned and hauled and washed and dried and then roasted and then ground and then brewed. And it was fantastic. So it was really cool to see that complete process and to think about, again, the habitat and how it's connected to all the birds that use those spaces. So after a couple days at Los Terrales, taking in the birds and the coffee, we headed over to a few spots on the edge of Santiago Atitlán, and that's Lake Atitlán, a little inlet there. A little bit lower in elevation, but nearby, and obviously a very pretty location. This is at sunset. And one place that we stopped to bird at, looking for a few special birds, was IMAP, which is the Mesoamerican Permaculture Institute. And so these are actually some Hass avocados that you see lining the road here as we pulled in. We were not able to steal any of those, even though that would have been delicious, I'm sure. But it was a beautiful place. There were, you know, amazing native flowers. You could see the mountains and the volcanoes in the background. You could see some of the nearby small towns. You know, just, we were there on a perfect day. Didn't even have to use any filters with my cell phone image, which this was. And we added some cool new birds. We were looking for a couple specialty hummingbirds, which we actually missed, which was a bit of a bummer. But we did get black-vented oriole, which you're seeing in the top left there. Bronze cowbird, we have a nice flock there in the top right. Amazon kingfisher there in the middle. We even had some, again, familiar birds to us. We have blue-winged teal here. We had belted kingfisher. So, you know, wintering birds that had done the same journey that we had done a few days previous, but they definitely had a harder trek than we did via Delta. After our stop at Lake Atitlán, or Santiago Atitlán, we were heading to our next destination. And of course, we're stuck in a Guatemalan-style traffic jam. It was a fun little parade to get a glimpse into what the local culture was like. You can see the rodeo princess there in the top right, or rodeo queen, I guess was her title. And so it might have set us back a little bit, a half an hour or so. But it was a lot of fun to kind of take in our local surroundings. And then the next place we stayed for a few days was Antigua, which maybe you've heard of, or maybe you've seen this archway. It's a beautiful, you know, colonial city with amazing architecture. It's not touristy, but a lot of travelers to Guatemala do come and visit this space. Just a really stunning location. And we took some time away from the birds, you know, to do our shopping and again, learn about the history and culture of this area. And again, you can see the volcanoes in the background at the end of these little roads. And kind of what you, or at least what I kind of envision of these idyllic Spanish colonial towns throughout Latin America. But again, we're crazy bird people. So we had our time, you know, getting our souvenirs, and it was back to the woods to look for birds. And our next spot that we spent 2 days at right outside of Antigua was Finca El Pilar. And this was more pine oak habitat, similar to what we had at Tecpan, not quite as high up. But it did have a higher elevation range. So we kind of drove up these little hills, and it allowed us to get some new birds for the trip and some amazing scenery, as you see here. They also had this really cool thing for e-birding that Cornell and others had partnered on, the wanted wood warbler flock. And so these are some of the birds that do overwinter down in Pilar, and ones that they want you to look out for, and of course use eBird. And if you've never birded with me, I'm always on eBird, so we were doing our part. We did have black-throated green warblers and black and white Townsend's, slate-throated redstart. We did not have any luck with hermit or golden-cheeked warblers. And on the far right there, you'll see Wilson's warbler. We had so many Wilson's warblers. In Georgia, you might get 1 or 2 a year if you're lucky. And they were just dripping off the trees. It was maybe, you know, the most common, or one of the most common birds we had in this part of the country. And pretty much anywhere in the high elevation, we had a lot of Wilson's warblers. And it was just a beautiful, casual place to birdwatch. It was a comfortable temperature, amazing flowers. And again, the birding was great. We spent one afternoon here, some night birding, and then came back the following day. Black-headed siskin was a new bird for us this trip, and one of the first birds we had after getting out of our bus. I'll let you listen to this one for a second. So that's the brown-backed solitaire, and one of the coolest bird calls I've ever heard. They were pretty common. They were calling a lot. They were so hard to get good looks at. So we did see a few of them. We heard a lot more. But it was such an amazing song that kind of, you know, filled the forest with sound as we walked around. Blue-throated Motmot was one of the most wanted species for me this trip, and it took some time, but we did get good looks at it right at dusk. And then we had one later on in the trip. But similar to that Lessons Motmot I showed you earlier, or at least similar in structure, and they're somewhat related. They actually do look pretty different, but you can see that kind of long, skinny tail, that pumpy kingfisher type build. Really striking bird to see. This was a photo I took through my scope of a black and white owl. We had one we went out owling. We had that and a fulvous owl, but this one put on a good show for us, that nice white and black barring. And then that next morning we went back, and they had a little swimming area and then the hummingbird feeders. And so we went to check out these feeders and had loads of success. So you can kind of make out under the little wooden roof there's a whole bunch of disc-like hummingbird feeders. And we camped out here for a while, and we had green-throated mountain jim. This was the only bird of the entire trip, or only individual of that species we had the entire time. It came and put on a good look for us. Azure-crowned hummingbird. This was a relatively common bird throughout the country. We had them in Guatemala City, but this was maybe the best look that we had of one. Airland hummingbird, again, striking a little bit darker, that nice deep green on top. Rivoli's hummingbird. Now, if you've birded in Latin America before or seen some hummingbirds in South Texas, there used to be one called magnificent hummingbird. It was split into two species, the northern population becoming Rivoli's. So this bird does occasionally dip into the southwestern United States. And then Talamanca hummingbird down in Costa Rica in the high elevations there. Rufous Sabrewing was another exciting hummingbird for us. I think we had a few more, violet sabrewing. I can't remember what else, but these are the ones I was able to get photos of. And it was a great way to kind of end our journey in the mountain pine ridge. So we, again, kind of focused around Lake Atitlán, went up from very high, 8,000 feet, came down a little bit, mountain pine type habitat, or excuse me, mountain oak pine. And it was just a great, comfortable, kind of cool and temperature place to start our birding trip. And then it was time to head east and kind of look for something completely different. So you can see in the bottom of the map there, you can see Antigua with that red dot, and you can see Lake Atitlán. So again, as a reminder, we were down there. You've maybe heard of Chichicastenango. It's kind of a popular expat location. But we were flying up to Tikal in the north. And so we headed off very early in the morning. And when we got to Flores on the far right, it was much, much warmer and nice and sunny and hot. And we were heading up to the Mayan ruins of Tikal, but of course we stopped to do some birding. We had this nice Lake Petin Itza, just south of Flores. And that bird on the top there is a snail kite, which maybe you've seen in South Florida, purple gallinal, northern jacana. What I found very interesting was that this lake is about 100 miles from the ocean, but we had brown pelican and laughing gull and royal tern. So it was really interesting to see some of those more coastal birds showing up in this body of water, but it's a rather large lake. And, 100 miles for a big bird like that might not be too far, but really exciting stuff. And here's Tikal. If you've never heard of Tikal, maybe you've seen photos of it. It's one of the most amazing, Mayan cities, Mayan ruins that are still around, and you, I think, will see why. We were able to spend a couple of days here. It's one of the major, again, Mayan sites. It was inhabited from the 6th century BC to the 10th century. And again, it kind of has a lot of that classic Mayan architecture, ball courts and reservoirs, carvings, temples, and some of the signs that really showed how sophisticated this culture was, with signs of astronomy and math. There was obsidian that was found there, which indicates there had to be some trade with cultures or cities further north. Right when we were there, or just before, there had been a new discovery using this laser technology in 3D pictures, where they're able to determine that underneath this forest, which I'll show you photos of, there was a much larger city or civilization here than they expected, or that it was known at the time, that there was an additional 60,000 homes on the periphery of these temples that were unknown until just a few years ago. And I think what's also special, besides this amazing history, is that these ruins are kind of in the middle of a 2 million hectare biosphere reserve, the Mayo biosphere. So it's not only these ruins, but they're surrounded by this amazing forest, just, completely chock full of wildlife. This was our local guide, Luis, and he was beyond fantastic. I know I'm talking glowingly about everything, but he couldn't have been better. We had Claudia, she was doing a great job, but Luis is an expert of Tikal and of the Petin, this state of Guatemala. He got his start in guiding and learning about birds when he was a teenager, and the Peregrine Fund wanted to do some research on the breeding raptors in this area, and he could climb the trees. As, again, a young teen, he would run barefoot up these trees and do measures of eggs and nesting birds and take photos. And that kind of got him interested in wildlife. And then he started, learning more and more about the ruins. And he is a true expert of Tikal and of the birds of the area. And he added a lot to our trip there. If you ever go to Tikal, you should stay at one of the 3 hotels that are within the biosphere. If not, you have to stay in Flores, and then you're bussed in, and you kind of get stuck with all the crowds. We were lucky enough to get rooms at the Jaguar Inn, which is one of these 3 hotels that, again, is right outside the gate of the actual reserve. So you can get in and get birding and get exploring before many of the crowds show up. And this is, again, some of the photos, our dining area, multiple little cabins with kind of 2 rooms in each cabin. Great birding here. We had blue-winged warbler and yellow-bellied flycatcher, and then kind of the more exciting tropical birds, bright-rumped Attila, Chachalacas, pale-billed woodpecker, all sorts of exciting stuff. And again, we were here for the birding, but here it's such a great compromise because you have these breathtaking ruins to look at here. Like this is Temple 1, I do believe. This is some of the main kind of open market type area. Some more of the temples poking out above the amazing trees. Again, more and more of the architecture. You can see some of the stone carvings and tablets right at the base. There's another area in the back called the Lost World, which has some really of the more old structures, and there tends to be a little less people. We had some great birding back there and some nice kind of foggy, hazy sunrises back there, which really were quite breathtaking. And here, again, this is from the top of Temple 5, I believe. You're looking at Temple 1, 2, and 3. I forget the numbers. But this is to really illustrate that kind of Maya biosphere that exists. So these temples poking out above these amazing cebas and canopy trees, howler monkeys calling everywhere, and just forest for as far as you can see. Now, one of the famous birds at Tikal is the orange-breasted falcon. If you didn't notice, there's a pair of them up here on top of the temple. So it's, you know, I went on my honeymoon to Tikal back in 2011, and this was the bird I really wanted to see there, and we found it. And pretty much perennially, they will nest on these temples. So when you go there and you're admiring the ruins, look at the top of these falcons, and they gave us great looks. They were acting like they were doing some courtship behavior. They were staying very close. They were flying around and calling. We got very lucky to have such fantastic views of this extremely difficult raptor to find. Another famous bird of this area is the Ocellated Turkey. The photo on the left is one I took with my cell phone through my scope. The photo on the right is to give you a better idea of the, you know, the complexity and the full picture of this bird. A really amazing bird. Again, that can be difficult to find. You can get it in Belize, southern Mexico, Guatemala, but at Tikal, they kind of wander anywhere that has open space. The Crested Guan. So we have the Horned Guan in the Highlands. This is a much more common, but still amazing guan that we had walking the trails. The Mastatira, kind of this one's a young bird or a little, maybe it's a female. The males can be quite striking white, but do have that bare pink orbital, you know, eye ring. A bird that's somewhat common throughout tropical America. Red Lord Parrot was one of the more common parrots that we had around Tikal. Brown jay, not that surprising, kind of like our blue jay. They're pretty gregarious, they're loud, relatively common. This one obviously came right up to us when we were standing on top of one of the temples. Its call oddly kind of reminds me of a red-shouldered hawk a little bit. So if you want to give that a listen, it's interesting to check out. Rufous-naped Wood-Rail, we had this bird obviously nesting right near the entrance of the park, near a gift shop in a little body of water. So this, I think, the only one we saw on the trip, but it obviously gave us fantastic views. King vulture, kind of putting our other vultures to shame. A really pretty, you know, black and white feather pattern. You can't quite make out the face too well, but it's yellows and reds and purples. If you go to Zoo Atlanta, we do have a couple of the king vultures down there, and a really amazing bird in my opinion. And many of the birds that we see up here in Georgia, summer tanagers. So if you ever want to know where our summer tanagers go, one location is Tikal in Guatemala. We have a good number of them. One thing that makes this area and makes Latin America so special for birding are the ant swarms. This is a northern barred wood creeper. It's eating a spider, not an ant, but these huge ant colonies or ant swarms will kind of take over the forest, and many birds will follow the ant swarms to eat the larger insects that the ants kind of scare up. And so as you go throughout Latin America, you'll hear of ant wrens and ant pittas and ant vireos and ant birds. And they're all kind of related to this behavior that the large tropical ants show. So northern barred woodcreeper was a bird we found frequently when we encountered these ant swarms, as was gray-headed tanager. And some of our more familiar birds like hooded warbler. Hooded warbler and Kentucky warbler were often mixed in with these woodcreepers and brown jays and gray-headed tanagers, Lesson's Motmot. I found it very interesting to see kind of the same community of birds, at least around this part of Tikal, were following the ant swarms. And as I had hoped, we found our wood thrush. So the trails at Tikal, many of them are kind of the sandy gravel. And we had a couple different areas that were pooling up with water. And our wood thrushes, the best video, were bathing in these puddles. And it might have been this exact puddle. We had 6 wood thrushes come out, and they were all bathing. And it was so cool to think about, you know, the whole complete life cycle that we were talking about, the importance of conservation for this species, not only in Georgia and parts further north, but where they overwinter in Guatemala and where they migrate to, like the Yucatan on their way northbound. It was also cool to see them like this and then have something like a purple-crowned fairy or something so tropical come and hang out with them. It just provided a whole different context to this bird that many of us associate with the eastern deciduous forest. And as always, it wasn't all birds. You know, the birds were exciting, but we took in some other cool stuff. We had a coati or coatimundi, which is the raccoon-like animal on the far left. We had many spider monkeys that we got good looks at there in the middle. We heard a lot of howler monkeys, but we didn't get quite the views like we did of the spider monkeys. And a ceiba tree is what you're seeing on the right with those impressive thorns. And when the birding was done, right before we headed out to Tikal, we were able to check out their little local museum that talks about a lot of the artifacts that were found on site or nearby. And again, to kind of learn more about that Mayan culture and the history of the site. It's really a great place to go for birds, especially maybe if you have a non-birding spouse or partner. It's a good mix of, you know, architecture, history, amazing trees and climate, and of course the wildlife. And unfortunately, that meant we had to head home. So we went back. We had a fantastic dinner here along Lake Flores our last night before heading back to Guatemala City. We had a couple new birds that we saw from the dock of our restaurant, and it was quite a special way to end before, again, going back to Guatemala City and flying home the following day. So how did we do? So on our trip, we had 275 species of birds, many, many lifers for everyone involved. We had 28 warbler species, including 21 that were migratory. So 21 that spend at least some of their time in the United States. Many of those eastern birds, I already mentioned a few of them with blue-winged warbler, Wilson's warbler, black-throated green, but we also had Townsend's and some of those more western species. And then some very familiar birds to us here in Georgia: wood thrush, Swainson's thrush, Baltimore oriole, summer tanager, yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is actually a pretty special bird down there, so I was excited to find it. And a lot of our big targets that I, you know, teased everyone with, we found. So we had a lot of luck with that. And one thing that I like to do, and most bird guides do, is at the end you ask everyone, hey, what was your bird of the trip? What was your favorite one? And I found it to be a great testament of the trip that everyone had a different choice. So we had all different fun species that people picked. For me, it was the Horned Guan, without a doubt. But for many people, they had their own thing, and maybe even a keel-billed toucan, which is what you're seeing there in the bottom right. So a very exciting, well-rounded trip, and it couldn't have gone smoother because of the amazing local guides that we had. Again, one thing that I've been lucky enough since I've started these international trips for Atlanta Audubon, and even the domestic trips, I've been able to travel with great people. I haven't had anyone who's been too difficult. We've had fantastic groups, and it just really makes the difference. I mean, if people are excited and having fun and willing to deal with hot weather or some bugs, it comes together. So these are just some of my shots of the amazing people I got to travel with. Again, this is Luis, our amazing guide at Mundo Perditos. This is the Lost World in the back of Tikal. One of my favorites, Karen, showing a little local boy how to use the binoculars and the amazing birds that we were seeing. This group even was brave enough to follow me down this road, even though it said danger on the left. So they were a trustworthy bunch. And again, here's our us up on one of the towers at Tikal looking out. So a fantastic group. All of you Atlanta Audubon people are, and I've been thrilled to travel with everyone. So where to next? So after Guatemala, we did Costa Rica earlier this year, prior to things shutting down before COVID broke out. And I know right now many people aren't planning or thinking about traveling, but maybe hopeful that in the not too distant future, we'll be out again and birding, maybe in new ways. We'll figure that out. But for the time being, we do have trips scheduled. And the next international trip that I'm very excited to be guiding is down to Oaxaca, Mexico. So actually not too far from Guatemala. We've kind of bounced around a little bit, but back down to that region. Now, Oaxaca is the most bird-rich state in the entire country of Mexico, which is a very birdy country. The state of Oaxaca has almost 800 species, so about the same as Guatemala and not too many less than all of the United States. Many state and regional endemics. Like Guatemala, it has an impressive culture, an archaeological heritage, fantastic food, you know, mole and mezcal and great stuff to really indulge on when we're down there. The first half of the trip is going to be kind of like we did in Guatemala, higher elevation near Oaxaca City. We're going to look for red warbler. So I showed you pink-headed warbler earlier. Here's red warbler on the left there. Slaty vireo, an endemic of that southern part of Mexico, will be a few of the birds that we target there. Monte Alban is another archaeological site that we're going to be able to visit too. You'll see kind of in the background, Oaxaca, at least this part is a bit more dry, not deserty, but a little more arid than a lot of what I showed you in Guatemala. We're then going to head down to the coast near Huatulco, where we're going to see that orange-breasted bunting, fingers crossed. And on our last full day, we're even going to do a near-shore pelagic. We're going to go out on a boat trip and look for shearwaters and petrels and albatross and terns and other things a few miles off the coast. So a really well-rounded, exciting taste of Southwest Mexico and one of the states that, again, has all that culture, history, and is a safe place to travel. So if you are interested, again, I know many people aren't thinking about this now, but if you're interested at all, shoot me an email. We have one spot remaining. That, of course, could change. So if you are a pair or if you're in a family, let me know and we can put you on the wait list. But this trip is scheduled for March of next year. Again, we're hoping things will be to a new safe normal by then. Our local guide will be Eric Antonio Martinez of Mexico Birding. If you don't know of Eric, or if you haven't been tuning into our webinars, I did a Birds and Beer event. I've done 3 of them actually, and he was one of the guests on the second one that I did. So if you're looking for more content, bird related for your evening, go to our digital resources page, check out our Birds and Beers, and you can hear Eric and I talking about this exciting trip and why Oaxaca is such a special place. And with that, I want to thank you so much for giving me some of your time on this Wednesday evening. I hope this allows you to kind of slip away from your home for a little while and daydream about colorful birds and traveling again in the hopefully near future. And I am more than happy to answer any questions or anything else, have a conversation. Again, thank you so much. And if you are gonna head out, again, I encourage you to keep checking our digital resources page, our Facebook page, because we are providing a lot of, I think, very fun and unique content from bird walks, virtually, of course, Fridays, and just producing more and more stuff to keep you all engaged and excited about birds.
Adam, we have a question that came in from Christina. She wants to know, what is the best time of the year to visit Guatemala?
I see that. So we went in November and December. In the winter time, you're going to get more species because you're going to have migrants like our birds going down, which I showed you. It's also normally a bit drier that time of year. So I believe anywhere from kind of like late October into maybe March or April would probably be the best time. It obviously is the tropics. It can get very hot. So you probably don't want to go in the summer because it's just going to be potentially unbearable. In the mountains, it might be a little bit better. But if I recall correctly from my research, kind of our winter is maybe the best time. It's going to be warm to mild in temperature, not as wet, and you're going to have the added diversity of our species being down there. So that'd be my general recommendation. Our time of year seemed perfect. I don't think we had one night where it rained while we slept. We had no rain at all when we were out birding. I literally think every day was sunny. So from my experience, November is great. Awesome. Well, again, if there are no other questions, keep your eye out. We'll be doing another one of these about Paraguay birding sometime in mid-June. If you probably never heard or thought much about birding in Paraguay, so if you want to learn about some really exciting and unique wildlife, that'll be a fun one. And then later in June, we'll be talking about Michigan, which is a trip I did last summer with Atlanta Audubon, where we went to look for the Kirtland's warbler and had another fantastic time. So there'll be more of these. And again, to repeat myself, lots of exciting content that all of us here are working hard on, especially Dottie, our communications director. So thank you all so much. Go enjoy a dinner or a nightcap and relax. And I hope that we can all bird together in person sometime soon.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Have a good night.